Let's be real for a second. When you think about where your food comes from, what do you picture? A farm? A grocery store? Well, today we're going to go way, way deeper than that. We're going on an incredible journey, from the soil itself all the way to your plate, to uncover how this hidden world, right under our feet, literally shapes our health. And this quote, it pretty much sums up everything we're talking about. This isn't just some nice poetic saying. Nope, it's a straight-up biological fact. The ground beneath us isn't just dirt, you know. It's a living, breathing ecosystem, and it is the absolute foundation of our well-being.
You know, we obsess over calories, protein, vitamins. We read every label. But what if I told you the single most important ingredient isn't even on that label? What if it's the soil itself? Let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so here's where the journey really starts. And you gotta understand this fundamental connection. When our soil gets sick, it's not just a problem for farmers. It sets off this whole chain reaction, a cascade of failures that messes with our food and, yeah, ultimately, our own health.
Now, let's flip that and look at the good side. It's a super clear pathway, right? You start with healthy soil. That creates this rich, diverse ecosystem, which makes the whole system more resilient, and boom, you get better public health. It's this beautiful, interconnected cycle where everything just works.
All right, let's talk about the journey of nutrients. I mean, where does the good in good food actually come from? The nutritional punch of an apple or a carrot, that's not something made in a factory. It is a direct inheritance from the soil. Healthy food literally grows from healthy earth. It's that simple.
And this leads to a really critical and, frankly, kind of scary concept called hidden hunger. Here's what that means. You can eat a full meal, feel totally stuffed, but your body is actually starving for those tiny but crucial micronutrients. And why does this happen? Well, it happens when our food is grown in soil that's just tapped out. It can't give the plants the building blocks they need, so they can't give them to us.
And listen, this is not just some theory. This is real. Take a look at this data from South Asia. We're talking about 40 to 50%, nearly half of all the farmland there being deficient in zinc. That's huge. And it means the food grown there is zinc poor, which leads to massive health problems, especially for kids.
But okay, it's not all bad news. Not at all. There are solutions, and they're based in nature. We can do things like add compost and biochar to help the soil hang on to nutrients. We can even use specific crop varieties that are basically bred to be nutritional powerhouses. We're talking about boosting the good stuff right from the source. Okay, so that's the good journey. But what happens when the path from soil to plate goes wrong? Now we're going to look at the darker side, where bad soil management turns our food into a delivery system for some pretty nasty, unwanted passengers.
And of course, pesticides are a massive part of this story. Look, when they're overused or sprayed right before harvest time, those chemical residues, they end up on our food. And these aren't harmless. We're talking about chemicals that can mess with our hormones, our brain function, a really serious risk to our health down the line.
So how are we supposed to be protected from this? Well, there's a really important rule for farmers. It's called the pre-harvest interval, or PHI. Basically, it's a legally required waiting period. You spray, and then you have to wait a specific amount of time for those chemicals to break down before you can pick the crop. It's an absolutely critical safety measure. Okay, but what can you do right now at home? Here's a super simple but effective tip. Research shows that just a simple baking soda wash can get rid of a lot of those surface pesticide residues. It's a really practical, powerful way to make your fruits and veggies that much safer.
But let's be honest, washing is just the last line of defense, right? The real solution is about farming smarter. It's about things like integrated pest management, which is a fancy way of saying we use nature's own solutions, like good bugs to eat the bad bugs, instead of just spraying everything. It's about preventing the problem at the source. Now, I want to tell you a story, and this one doesn't happen over a single season. It unfolds over decades, over generations. It's the story of calcium, and it perfectly shows how a decision we make about the soil today can have very real health consequences for our kids and even our grandkids.
Think of it like a slow-motion chain reaction. It starts in Decade 1. Overuse of certain fertilizers makes the soil acidic, and that just strips the calcium right out. Fast forward to Decade 2. The crops, and the milk from animals that eat those crops, they're all low in calcium. And then, in Decade 3, what do we see? A rise in bone and dental problems in people. It's a direct line.
And the scale here, it's just mind-boggling. We're talking about 49 million hectares of land in India alone. To give you some perspective, that's an area bigger than the entire country of Sweden. This is not some small niche problem. It is a massive, silent crisis.
Wow. Okay, so knowing all this, the good journey, the bad journey, the generational impact, where do we go from here? How do we start building a safer path from the soil to our plates?
Well, the answer is all about safeguarding the entire system. We have to think bigger. We need to monitor what's happening and have smart standards in place to protect our food supply chain from the very beginning.
And part of that is watching out for these invisible threats. For example, heavy metals like lead and cadmium are sneaky. They can actually mimic essential nutrients, tricking plants into sucking them up. Or take arsenic, which can get into rice from the water. And of course, we need to strictly enforce those maximum residue limits, the MRLs, for pesticides, to make sure nothing dangerous ever gets close to our dinner table.
And guess what? Just like before, nature has some of the coolest solutions. It's like a natural cleanup crew. We can use certain plants, like vetiver grass, to literally pull toxins out of the ground. We can use smarter watering techniques for rice to dramatically reduce arsenic uptake. It's all about working with nature to restore that balance.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Food safety doesn't start on a clean stainless steel factory line. It begins way before that. It begins deep in the soil. Real food safety is an act of ecological stewardship.
In this quote, this really hits it home. It proposes a radical but brilliant shift in how we think. Just imagine for a second, what if we paid as much attention to soil fertility data as we do the nutritional guidelines on a cereal box? If we start valuing the source of our food that much, we can build a system that's truly resilient.
So I'll just leave you with this one final question. After seeing this entire hidden journey, this incredible trip from the microscopic life in the soil all the way to the food on your plate, will you ever look at your next meal the same way again?